Chapter 8. The Izod Factor. I have wondered at times how it was possible for the Lord Almighty to have allowed the creation of the likes of Hitler and for Osama bin Laden to have escaped his watchful eyes. Assuming those were just two of his bad days, then I would submit that he had one more such day with the creation of the alligator. With the possible exception of man, that creature has no natural enemies. I see no qualities that would make the reptile beneficial in the scope of the food chain. It is simply a mean and unpredictable form of life. Back in the late 70s, when I was a rookie Floridian fresh out of New York's Westchester County, I was working in the Lake Country west of Orlando as a sales manager for RC Cola. The plant was located in the boonies, some 10 miles outside of downtown Lakeland, and was situated adjacent to what one might refer to as a swamp. One morning, I was witness to an alligator attack that was, without question, the most horrifying event I had ever experienced, and hopefully ever will. George, one of our most experienced drivers, was checking the product load on his truck prior to starting his daily route. His truck had been parked for the night next to a fence at the far end of the yard. As he jumped down off one of the bays, a 9-foot alligator came from under the truck, clamped its jaws around George's arm, and took him to the ground. George later said he did not actually feel the attack and that his first recollection was that of staring at the beast eye to eye. But whatever the case, within seconds of going down, the realization that the alligator had his arm in a death grip not only hit George but his neural system. The screams were agonizing. "Somebody shoot the fucking thing!" I could hear him plead as I ran to the office phone. I pleaded to the 911 operator and suggested the possibility of a chopper. I knew it could be a while before help arrived. As I raced back to the scene, I was expecting and hoping to hear a gunshot. No gunshot. No friggin' gun. Jesus Christ, we had 12 rednecks and 9 pickup trucks and no gun? At that point, another driver who was 6'4" and about 240 pounds came from behind the gator and proceeded to sit on its back. He had his work gloves on and took hold of both the lower and upper jaws. Help arrived a few minutes later, but not before George lost his patience and somehow got his arm free. It was a god-awful mess, but it was intact. After many hours in surgery, the limb was saved, but I learned later that its use was limited. 15 years later, my fear and/or respect for the species Alligatoridae had not diminished in the least. Every time I saw one, I would relive the horror that George had endured. On a cold Sunday in December 1995, I was suddenly thrown back into the deep end of that pool, but with far less tragic results. The GM at the golf course had asked me to fill in for her and play manager for the day. Wow, I thought. I'm in charge. What should I do first? I had just finished tuning the TV satellite dish to the proper band for the Jets-Dolphins game when a vision appeared before me. It was Crocodile friggin' Dundee, complete with the boots, hat, jeans, and sequined rawhide vest. Seeing the guy standing amongst the golf clothes and clubs, the scene was all the more surreal. "You Bill?" he barked with a resounding tone. "Yes," I replied. "How can I help you?" "Seems y'all got a pesky alligator out here giving y'all some trouble," he drawled. "First I've heard about it," I replied with surprise. He went on to explain that he had spoken to Linda, the GM, a week earlier about an alligator on the 16th hole, and how he had told her that he would wait for a day like this to come by. "They love to sunbathe on a day like this. If he's out there, then he'll be out sunning himself. That's for darn sure." "Okay, how can I help you?" I asked. He asked me to meet him around front by his truck so he could grab some stuff he'd need. He put it on the back of the golf cart and seated himself in the passenger seat next to me. "Take me to the critter," he exclaimed. For my day in charge, I was dressed in red polyester, yes, polyester, slacks. The shoes were black loafers with tassels, and the shirt was, of all things, a white Izod, complete with the alligator logo. Perfect. I reviewed the situation. I am deathly afraid of alligators. I am now on a mission to catch one. The football game has started. I'm wearing red polyester slacks. There's an embroidered alligator on my left tit. It seemed that Dundee did not work for the state, but was licensed to capture alligators that were a problem in residential areas and relocate them to a more suitable habitat. Where can I apply? We arrived at the 16th fairway, which was quite close to the clubhouse. He pointed to a clearing through some Australian pines where there was a rectangular pond adjacent to a canal. I had never really noticed the pond before because it was far left of the fairway and very seldom in play. Damned if he wasn't right. There on the bank was a 7-foot, later to be measured, sunbathing with his eyes closed freaking alligator. I slowed to a stop. "Oh yeah," said Dundee. "This should be easy. He's sleeping." We were about 10 feet away from the gator. Dundee went to the back of the cart where he retrieved a hollow metal pole with a noose at one end and a rope at the other that was used to tighten the noose. By that time I was thinking, do alligators sleep? As Dundee moved the noose about 6 inches from its jaws, the reptile woke up, was suddenly airborne, and in a nanosecond was in the pond. Fine with me, I thought. Now I can watch the game. But no less than 5 seconds later, there were 2 evil eyes on the surface of the murky water with a catch-me-if-you-can look. Dundee dropped that pole and grabbed another off the cart that had a barbed hook on the end of a 10-inch rope. I nervously lit a lucky strike. Dundee went to the edge and cast the hook beyond the gator, then gave a mighty tug. A second later, what we had was an angry alligator suspended in the air 5 feet above the surface of the pond, screaming with an ungodly sound. Yeah, they scream. Now it gets good. "Bill, grab that noose, will you?" I looked around to see if there was anyone else in the immediate area who might answer to the name of Bill. No luck. Before I picked up the pole, I was wondering if I should tell the guy I was from New York, and that, though it might come as a great shock to him, this was my very first attempt at looping a rope around the jaws of a suspended alligator. "Just slip the noose on and pull the rope at the end. We'll bring him in together," he barked. I somehow managed to accomplish my task, and just as we started to move the gator toward the shore, the hook came loose. As Dundee reached out to grab the swinging hook, he missed, and the barbed edge cut his hand. He was bleeding profusely. Notice something here? Let's see. He does not have the alligator. I, on the other hand, do have the alligator. Nothing about this is funny. With Dundee's huge boot on the gator's head, he was attempting to wrap his bleeding hand with a towel. The reptile was flailing, which added the extra treat of its tail becoming a weapon. While I gripped the noose tightly around its neck, Dundee removed his foot from the head and grabbed another towel from the cart. "When you cover their eyes, it usually calms them down," he said with authority. I was about to inquire as to the over and under on usually when he dropped the towel over the gator's eyes, and the son of a bitch went limp. Dundee then took a large roll of 3-inch duct tape and wrapped it around the jaws a few times. He took one more strip of tape and covered its eyes. "What now?" I asked, finally feeling somewhat comfortable. "Now we lay him across the floor of the buggy, and we get him to the truck." I quickly offered to pay Dundee for the entire roll of tape if he would put about 10 more wraps around the snout. He humored me with 3 or 4 more layers. At that point, it occurred to me that everybody was at the bar and totally involved with the Jets and Dolphins. Who's going to believe all this? Something made me look up, and I noticed Kathy, the drink cart girl, about 50 feet away. As we passed her, I asked her how long she had been there. "Saw the whole thing, Murph." Holy shit! Right then, she was my best friend. We proceeded up the hill past the windowed bar and onto the front of the clubhouse. For a few minutes, we took center stage away from football. A short time later, and with the gator secured in the truck, I was washing up in the locker room when I looked up to see Dundee attending to his hand. He cocked his head and stared at me. "Well, look at you with that little old gator on your shirt," he said with almost curious disbelief. "Where can I get me one of them?" I can only guess the Izod brand was not a big seller at the bait and tackle shops out in the Everglades. The Izod Factor 2. The sequel. Much like the Crocodile Dundee movies, I experienced a sequel a few years later. It's important for you to understand and picture the particular hole that's at the center of this next scenario. While it's not more than a basic par 5, your picture of the hole is key to how this story unfolded and why it shall be etched in my mind forever. It was a straightaway, with a fence and a road on the right. A large lake that comes into play on many holes runs along the left. The most important aspect is that there's a valley for the first 50 yards or so, and then a level plateau for the next 150 to 200 after that. A well-struck ball that reaches the end of that flat with a good amount of pace on it can and will carry down a second slope and end up, in terms of yardage, being a monster drive. The proper protocol is for the group on the tee to wait for the carts of the group ahead to reappear on the next upward slope, as they will be out of sight until that point. With the scene set, here's what happened. The golf course was just north of Miami, and I was there as part of a crew of about 12 or 16 guys that like to be first group out each Saturday. Management loved us because we took care of the help, played at a great lead pace, and left a bunch of cash at the bar. However, on that particular day, there was a new pro shop attendant on duty who was unaware of our Saturday morning arrangement and had booked 4 ladies in the first spot, creating what was commonly known, even then in the mid-1980s, as a clusterfuck. We could also see from their attitude that, come hell or highest possible water, those ladies were going out ahead of us. The club's managers, who might have been able to unravel the thing, were not in yet, so after much snarling and "this is gonna suck" remarks, everyone settled down. Off went the girls with a promise from the somewhat contrite pro shop attendant that we would never see them again all day. Right. Fast forward 15 minutes. The ladies' carts had been in the second valley for an inordinate amount of time, and we could just see the tops of their heads to the left by the edge of the water. One of my crew was just about to drive out and give the girls a few mild words of advice when the following sequence of events occurred seemingly all at once. One lady ran full speed up the far slope and proceeded to fall flat on her face. Her partner, who was driving the cart, came on the scene, hastily put the fallen lady in the cart and headed to the right cart path. The next lady appeared, running in full gait toward the T, and even from that distance we could see she was covered in mud. Her partner and cart driver caught up to her, helped her into the cart, and also headed hastily to the cart path, all the while screaming a string of unprintable obscenities. It should be acknowledged that we all knew the frustration of golf carts possessing only one speed. But were it not for that, you can be sure that both of those buggies would no longer have been upright. As the ladies passed us on the tee box on their way back to the clubhouse, they were crying and quivering and uttering barely audible phrases. 15-foot alligator, 10-foot alligator, almost dragged Shirley into the lake. We all teed off with the feeling that the ladies would have to collect themselves for quite a while before they could think about golf, and we would cross that bridge another time. As we passed the crime scene, we could see the evidence of what had more than likely taken place, along with the perpetrator himself, or herself, whose head and upper body were just peeking out of the water. We all agreed on the gator's total head-to-tail estimate of 6 to 7 feet, which is not to say that an alligator of that size can't or won't inflict great damage and pain. The truth was that the beast had come out of nowhere and the poor girls had been justifiably panic-stricken. We learned later that the 4 ladies, quite understandably, had all peed their pants and there would be no more golf for them that day. Our group, on the other hand, played in record time and our profound empathy was and will always be with those 4 ladies. It was a beautiful day to play golf. God, I love alligators.